Hello, my name is Ray Dogum, and welcome to VibeCast. Thank you for joining us as we explore the exciting advancements in technology-enabled collaboration to excel important drug development. VibeBio seeks to find every cure for every community. We think big as no one should be left behind in the pursuit of living a healthy, happy, and productive life, free from disease. Collectively, we have the skills, we have the technology, we have the passion. We now need the community catalyst to bring it all together. That's Vibe. We see a future where communities of biopharma experts and patients collaborate to identify high potential rare disease medicines and have the ability to access capital on demand. The VibeCast is our informational weekly podcast as we explore some of the hottest topics in drug development with some of the dynamic people that make up the Vibe community. Join us to learn, imagine, question, and help us identify and develop solutions together. Our guest today is Chris Moxham. Chris is a drug hunter with over 25 years of experience in large pharma and biotech. He has a PhD in molecular and cellular pharmacology and spent over 20 years at Eli Lilly and Company, where he helped develop over 10 molecules into the clinic across multiple therapeutic areas and across both small and large molecule modalities. He's currently CSO at Rarebase, a public benefit precision medicine company that leverages cutting-edge technology and biology to discover and develop treatments for the millions of people worldwide living with rare disease. Chris, thanks so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a good discussion.
Awesome. Maybe before we get started, you can sort of give a brief background about yourself for the audience.
Yeah, so beyond what you just described in a professional sense, on a personal side, I'm from New York originally, Long Island. I'm the youngest of seven, five brothers, one sister, and had an upbringing that was, I would say, pretty much kind of an all-American upbringing, a lot of athletics, and had a good time. Got interested in science probably when I was in the fifth grade.
What sports were you into?
I played Little League baseball, golf, soccer, basketball, street hockey, just about everything pretty much with that many brothers. Always had something going on, always had a team, two teams to put together. So yeah, I really enjoyed growing up and still stay active today.
Well, I think part of that actually being so involved in sports and on teams, what you do now, it's not individual sport, is it? It's a team sport as well. So I'm sure you've got a lot of learnings and experience that you've.
It's very much a team sport, absolutely, and one that I enjoy quite a bit. I think that's one of the aspects that I enjoy the most is when the team comes together and everyone is focused on this critical goal of discovering a new medicine.
So on the topic of teams, I think it's quite interesting we dig into that a little bit more because starting up a company, a biotech firm, right? Let's say you're looking potentially for team members and trying to identify the right individuals that would supplement and complement what you're trying to work on. What is your approach to developing a team for a biotech company? And I know it's sort of outside the original topics of what we're going to discuss, but I think this is important.
I mean, I think there's some fundamental elements that would be consistent across building any team that starts with, the right skill set, right, for the roles and responsibilities that you need on your team. So you start there, but I think perhaps even more importantly, because you can always teach skills to a certain degree to people or team members, it's more, I think, the intangible traits and character traits of the potential team member that you really want to dig into. And individuals, for example, who are really going to work hard and be resilient, particularly in an early stage biotech where things are not always going to go your way. And so I look for more of those character traits, if you will, that are the things that you can't necessarily teach, but are really important to success. People who really want to be part of a team and understand that, in a sense, no one is above the team. And so it's a combination of the right skills, but I think more importantly, the right character traits to be part of a high functioning team and someone who really wants to work hard and be successful.
Great answer. I think what I want to kind of learn more about now is your current company, Rarebase, and what they do. Can you describe what Rarebase is and what they do?
Yeah, we are a for-profit biotech focused on discovering therapeutics for rare diseases, monogenic rare diseases. We also are a public benefit company, which means that we have the ability or the latitude, if you will, to make decisions that promote public good over profit, as it were. So if we uncover a potential new opportunity, new therapeutic, or had two choices, the CEO at least has the latitude to consider public good as part of that decision making. And so it really just is a reflection of the vision and the mission that our co-founders had, as both of them are affected by rare disease in different ways, but are affected, and really wanted to have a company vision and mission that was very much tied to serving the patient community at large and really trying to fill this void that exists in the medical space for people living with rare diseases.
So what are some of the pros and cons of being a public benefit precision medicine company?
The only con I can think of is that people typically don't know what that is, right? So they ask you, what is a public benefit company? Is that a nonprofit? And we are very much a for-profit biotech. But I think the pro, of course, is what I just alluded to, which is there's always this consideration of the public good in what we're doing for rare disease, people living with rare diseases at the tip of the spear in terms of what we're doing as a company, how we operate, how we plan for the future.
And when we describe this public good, how is the public good being defined, or who's the one that says this qualifies, like what we're doing for this project or this treatment? We can all agree that this is counts as a public good. I know maybe that's like a kind of nuanced question, but
yeah, an example might be repurposing of approved drugs, right? So it may very well be that there are already existing approved drugs that are available in the United States, for example, that have an unexplored but potential new indication in a rare disease. Now, uncovering that could be very beneficial, right, and serve a public good to patients. But you might say that, well, based upon past experience, repurposing an approved drug is not a significant commercial endeavor, right? There's not a lot of return on that particular investment. And so why do it? And that's an example of where part of the Rarebase mission is to, as we uncover them, uncover repurposing opportunities to make that known and make that available in the public domain.
That makes sense. And I'm sure there's lots of opportunities like that, especially these days where there's already so many commercialized treatments, drugs. You are a self-proclaimed drug hunter. What does that mean for people who might not understand what a drug hunter is or does?
I guess to me, it's, you're thinking about the drug label, right? And a drug label really is that integrated set of drug discovery disciplines that have to come together. But a drug hunter is not only just thinking about, well, what's the indication, say a rare disease, and how might it be used, what's the mechanism, but a drug hunter is thinking about what's called also the target product profile, right? And working with a team of experts in each of those requisite disciplines to deliver something that has all the essence of a drug, right? And a drug, if you look at it, a label of a drug that's been approved by the FDA, for example, it has multiple sections to what describes the label. There's the usage and indications, there's safety and tolerability, there are drug-drug interactions, there's the clinical pharmacology, there's the non-clinical toxicology, and all of those sections, if you will, represent important disciplines that you would find within drug discovery scientists. But I think drug hunters are always thinking about sort of that next level up, which is what is the target profile that will ideally, using sort of the levers of invention and innovation, deliver a first-in-class or best-in-class therapy.
So where do drug hunters look for drugs? So I'm sure, you can scour the internet. I mean, that's where I would start, right? But what are sort of like the resources that you're aware of that probably other drug hunters are aware of and they go to maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's a variety of different domains. Certainly the scientific literature is a place where ideas and learning about disease states, potential mechanisms underlying disease biology are many times uncovered. Certainly within the halls of an existing pharma company, there's a lot of deep expertise in given areas. Looking at results from clinical trials will give you a lot of information around patient populations, around a current standard of care. What are the current limitations and opportunities to build a more effective therapy? Scientific conferences is another place. But the other, of course, is that, a drug hunter will many times look within what is now very much a growing modality toolbox. So beyond just small molecules and large molecules, you've got RNA therapeutics, you've got cell therapies, which are really coming into their own. There's gene editing and gene therapy, vaccines. And so as, again, drug hunters and drug discovery scientists pull together that picture of what would be the optimal therapy here, there's also turning to, the actual process of drug discovery and looking at that modality toolbox to really understand the best opportunity.
Yeah, because the way I see it, like the term drug is so broad, and I feel like nowadays therapy is more specific on, you can call them like therapy hunters, maybe. I don't know if that is more aligned, or
Yeah,
I guess we're talking semantics here. It doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, I think it's more of just the mindset of there are individuals, and importantly so, who are very much focused on disease biology, for example. And that plays a critical role in drug discovery or drug hunting. There's just, I think, just another level to that, and maybe that just comes with experience and time, where one gets exposure to what actually goes into this incredible and very complex process called drug discovery, R&D, and what's needed ultimately to get something to patients.
Interesting. So I know that Rarebase has a lot of tools and data that is used throughout this process as well. Maybe you can describe to us some of the products or services that Rarebase offers.
Yeah. So, at our heart, we're a biotech company, right? So we've got our own laboratories, and we built a platform that we call Function that allows us to interrogate large numbers of genes, just north of 15,000 at a time in response to each drug. And we are very much focused on rebalancing the root cause gene expression for these various monogenic rare disorders. The other facet to Rarebase is that, we partner very early on with patient organizations. And so we form research collaborations with individuals who are affected by a rare disease, or their families, or these patient organizations that have a remit around to try to find therapies around a given rare disease. And in these research collaborations, we may then explore our own data set or generate new data sets to understand if there are starting points or early opportunities. And then we'll work to build the appropriate cell models to further characterize those actives to see if that activity confirms, and then revalidate it in something that might be a cell-based model of the disease. And so it's very much, early stage drug discovery. But I think what's quite unique is that we do partner very early on with these patient organizations. I think the other piece is just the depth and breadth of the data that we've generated to date. I think we'll have wide and broad applicability across the rare disease landscape.
Can you describe like a typical Rarebase partnership that you have with these early stage patient organizations?
Yeah, so it's usually multiple milestones to it. It's a research collaboration at its heart. And so we are endeavoring to discover potential therapeutics, small molecules, through our screening activities. Many times these patient organizations either have created patient-derived iPSCs that can be differentiated into the appropriate cell type, so they have the proper genetic context, or early on we collect blood, for example, from which we can generate iPSCs and then differentiate those into the appropriate patient-derived model. So through these early stage partnerships, one, they're getting access to professional drug discovery in a way that typically wouldn't happen because their disease may be too small for a larger company to really need to invest the time and capital relative to other choices that they could make. And so we, through these research collaborations, really create a tremendous opportunity for underserved patient communities that, like any patient, unfortunately, 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease, and 95% of them don't have a therapy. And so Rarebase exists, like many other companies that are trying to help rare disease patients, as a means to fill that void.
Yeah, those numbers are staggering. It's quite interesting. And I feel like over time, we'll probably uncover additional rare diseases and mutations, and hopefully we'll be able to reach a point where our existing therapeutic platforms or models can sort of be reproduced or replicated for these other mutations or diseases. I think that's sort of like everyone's holy grail here in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, this really, again, back to drug hunting, these monogenic rare disorders embody precision medicine. And much like we've learned over the years in oncology, when you know what the genetic driver is, that makes that a more tractable problem to approach. And it's the same thing in rare diseases in spades, right? Frankly, there are many 3,700 known root cause genes for monogenic rare disorders. I think the issue has been that many times these patient populations are too small to garner the attention because the commercial upside, if you will, is deemed to be not sufficient.
Yeah, and I think the industry now is sort of taking a second look at how these biotech firms are being financed as well. I think a lot of these potential therapies for these smaller communities have been overlooked, neglected in the past. Through my research, I've seen that as well. You're saying it here, but do you think we're at this inflection point in the industry where the models for creating drugs for rare diseases has potential in some way, or do we just need a new model?
Well, I think things are certainly evolving in an important way, and I think there really is this groundswell of demand, but also willingness to participate on the part of patient organizations in funding drug discovery. And that's part of what occurs in our research collaborations. I think there will continue to be pressure on regulators and policymakers around improving the system to create more regulatory flexibility, to make rare disease clinical trial design and execution much more amenable. And I think, as I said, 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease. This is not rare. In fact, I would submit it's a societal or a social imperative that we do what we can for humanity.
Yeah, and if you're saying that 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease, I'm sure it's like 1 in 3 know someone who have a rare disease at least, right? So, and they may be affected as well. It could be family members, could be a caretaker. So that's also something to consider, because their lives could also be improved if the patient was able to recover, be treated.
Absolutely. Yeah. The impact of living with a rare disease is, certainly the patients, obviously, but their families, their extended families and friends, and not to mention the significant healthcare costs that come along with the fact that there aren't treatments.
You've mentioned multiple times that your company partners with patient organizations. I'm curious, who are sort of like the individuals, not by name, but like what category of people at these patient organizations are you interacting with the most? Is it the patients themselves? Is it the leaders of the organizations? Are they scientists who are part of these organizations that can help you on like a technical level? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the above. Many times it's the leaders of these patient organizations that either reach out to us, or we've started some broader outreach efforts now, where we try to understand if there's a common alignment in a way in which we can partner together to try to move things forward. Many times the leaders of these organizations are, parents of a child who's affected, living with a rare disease. These organizations also pull together scientists in the field from academia or industry to build advisory boards, and we interact through those means as well. So what's really great about it is it's everyone who's part of the ecosystem, if you will, getting involved to try to move the needle and discover new therapeutics for these very underserved patient communities.
So one thing I saw on while reading about Rarebase is that you guys have generated over 1 billion data points in your model. Can you discuss in more detail how that model is different from other companies?
Yeah, I would say that what differentiates it is just the sheer depth and breadth of what that data represents. So as I said, on average, we're detecting 17,000 genes at a time in response to each drug treatment, which, if there are roughly 20,000 genes that are expressed in a human cell, this is near genome scale drug response data that we have at our disposal. And we are pointing it very specifically at the broad landscape of rare diseases. So there are roughly 3,700 known root cause genes across the monogenic rare disease space. And when we can measure 17,000 genes at a time, you can imagine that in any one cell screen, we can detect a broad swath of many of those genes. And so we are, in effect, screening a franchise in a single shot when we conduct a neuron screen. But we're also detecting root cause genes that are associated with rare diseases outside of the neuronal space, for example, which creates the ability to, now I've got a hypothesis here, let me go test it in the appropriate cell type. And so as a lead generation engine, if you will, as a product engine, this creates enormous opportunity that one typically doesn't see either at a pharma or another biotech. And that's, I think, what really differentiates it. The methodology, we're using high throughput 3' RNA sequencing. That is not unique. It's a proven technology, certainly. Screening small molecules is not something new. What's really differentiating here is the depth and breadth of the data, as well as how we're pointing it squarely at the entire landscape of monogenic, genetically defined rare diseases.
How is the use of artificial intelligence now becoming more and more of a common theme? I think we're seeing not just in biotech, but across many industries. What's your vision for, or what's your anticipation with AI in terms of analyzing this information and providing insights?
We are certainly actively attempting to build machine learning models and hope to use AI in this space with the data set that we're generating and future data sets that we'll generate. I think one, and others have said it as well, so I'm not saying anything new here, but just, I think you have to step through the hype, perhaps, of everything that it could be, or what has been proclaimed as what it could be, and really get down to the actual application. So we are looking to apply machine learning and AI in the ability to predict novel structures from the data set that we have with the chemical structures that we've already tested. Now, I don't think that that's immediately out of the box going to lead to, here's a new drug, but rather here's a new novel starting point or some optimized step along the way that takes you down the path towards getting to novel drugs. We will use the data to predict activity in alternative cell types, which will limit and reduce, I think, the amount of screening that we'll have to do in any one new cell type. That is, many of these biological or pharmacological pathways are conserved. And so I think we will find the ability to build a model that will predict activity in new cell types as we break out into additional therapeutic areas, if you will.
That's really interesting. I feel like, the whole industry is definitely figuring out how they're going to implement machine learning and deep learning AI. And I also wonder, on the other side, on the regulatory side, is the FDA starting to use AI models in order to review all their applications, for example? And maybe you don't have the answer to this, but I'm thinking about future of biotech and how this can all play out. What do you think?
I don't know specifically. I would have to think that they too are thinking about how can they use machine learning algorithms to review the vast amounts of regulatory data that have been generated over the last many decades to uncover patterns, right? That's part of what the FDA does today, where they will recognize patterns in adverse events between molecules that target the same type of molecule. They're in the same drug class, right? And so pattern recognition, if you will, is a means of using machine learning to uncover those types of things. I have no doubt that the FDA is likely talking about the application of machine learning and AI to both streamline, but also fully understand and utilize all of the information and data that's at their disposal.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll have to find someone from the FDA to answer that in more depth, but I appreciate your answer too. What excites you the most about the next wave of biotech?
For me, I think it's the next several years, just the ability to tune and renormalize dysregulated cell biology, either intracellular or intercellular. And I think as we focus more and more on degenerative disorders and or aging, it's not just one cell type. It's an ecosystem or microenvironment of cell types. And I think the modality toolbox, coming back to the toolbox, I think that toolbox more and more will be used and when leveraged and evolved and optimized to, as I say, tune intercellular biology and renormalize these dysregulated microenvironments that occur within degenerative disorders. I think that's something I'm interested in very much, but also I think that's where an area where I think biotechnology will make some significant gains. And I think that's still very much an untapped area.
Just to clarify that, are you talking about how the different cells within the body may be interacting and how maybe drugs might be affected by these interactions? And I'm sure there's a lot more. I know the interactome is like a concept as well that
just think about, for the regenerative processes within our body, muscle regeneration, for example, right? A variety of different cell types have to participate that and be orchestrated appropriately at the right times to have that occur faithfully and effectively. In a degenerative disease like a muscular dystrophy, it's clear that it's not just myoblasts or myotubes that become dysregulated. There are other cell types within that niche that are now dysregulated and likely contributing to that disease state. And so what I believe, and I think it'll be true in other degenerative disorders, that there are multiple different cell types that are become dysregulated. And what I believe will happen within biotechnology is that more and more we will learn how to retune those systems collectively as a system, using the full breadth of the modality toolbox, whether it's small molecules, large molecules, cell therapies, synthetic biology. That's what I think is really exciting frontier in this space.
To dive in a little deeper, when you say retune, I know that's like a big paintbrush about different activities or tasks and goals you want to accomplish, but you want to give a little bit more detail about some of just examples maybe of what that can look like?
Yeah, so the concept that I'm, when I say retune, is essentially renormalize, reinstitute the normal process and system, right? And so it may be that within a muscular dystrophy, yes, there's dysregulation in the ability of myoblasts to differentiate into myotubes or for satellite cells to support normal regeneration. But there are other cell types within a muscular dystrophy, like these FAP cells, these fibrodipogenic progenitor cells, that become dysregulated and start to go down the wrong path, if you will. And so what I mean by retuning is taking a dysregulated process of regeneration that has become out of whack and retuning that and renormalizing it back so that it's actually operating as intended with the normal participation of the right cell types at the right time and for the right duration.
Fascinating. I mean, I think that's all really exciting stuff. And, there's a whole growing field that just keeps growing and expanding, and not just expanding, but there's iterations, like there's different fields that are coming out. Every year I hear about different sciences being established through this research.
I mean, I think if you just, look at the advent of immuno-oncology, which started many years ago, but it's the idea that, one can begin to tune the immune system and redirect it back towards targeting of cancer cells. And so all the different ways in which scientists and drug hunters are trying to tune the immune system in the context of immuno-oncology is a great example.
Epigenetics is another really interesting one for me. And I think that field is continuing to grow. And for me, it's interesting because it might uncover some things that we can do on a daily basis that have nothing to do with drugs, but that might influence our, prognosis, for example. So, how does the central nervous system affect some of these diseases? Like, is there something that we can do? Does meditation help? These sort of like questions that have some answers that are not super clear, right? Whether or not meditation can cure anything, for example, but it's worth studying, I suppose. Do you agree?
I do. I think because, one's overall health, if you will, I think is an accumulation of many different sort of inputs, if you will, right? And so to the extent that meditation or exercise, going for walks, whatever, in addition to what we think of more traditionally in terms of health and healthcare, I think they all play a very important part.
Do you have any advice for early drug hunters looking to make an impact?
A couple things, I suppose, one of which is be a sponge, right? Just learn as much as you can and never stop learning and never stop being coachable. I'm really grateful for the time that I spent at Eli Lilly and Company, for example, and had many great mentors along the way. In my case, many of them happen to be medicinal chemists who really understand the drug hunting process and took me under their wing and taught me about that. And also took a very pragmatic view of not getting beyond objectivity in terms of, is this a project or an idea that's really going to have legs, or understand when the data tells you that it's time to stop. And maybe it'll come back, the idea, but it's time to move on. Another individual during my career said, you're going to get $1 million education as part of this. And I think I totally agree with that at this point in my life. So I think as for early drug discovery scientists at the earliest parts of their career, just really, you're part of something very special, but it's complex, and you really need to pay attention, listen to people, ask questions, and you'll be rewarded.
That's good advice. Are there any like red flags that maybe you've seen in the past, or sort of like just things that you might see as a drug hunter and say, okay, this is not something I want to touch?
Drug discovery at its heart is a very noble practice, right? And so ethics, it's a highly regulated environment, and for good reason. And so, anything that you would be asked to do or you're thinking of doing, that really, either you have a little voice inside your head that says, this doesn't sound right. You definitely should speak up and talk to somebody, because what we do ultimately will affect somebody else's life, and or their health. And so you have to take that very seriously. I think the other, as I said, is just, having that perspective to kind of step back when you're working on either it's your pet project, right, that you're trying to drive forward. You have to be a champion for those things, but I think you also just have to have those moments where you step back and look at the whole picture of data, and not just get beyond objectivity and just keep pushing ahead at any cost because it's your pet project, but rather listen to the people around you who might be telling you, hey, it's time to give this idea up. Let's go find another one.
Yeah, that's fair. Good advice. Definitely important to keep in mind the ethics of all this, because we are heading into a world where the technology is quite advanced and could really just be very impactful on someone's body or mind, or however you want to.
I think it's always been that way, and that's why the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was put in place many, many years ago. But you just have to be cognizant of the fact that ultimately, the new method that you're discovering, and when you start a clinical trial, you're asking somebody else to take a huge risk on your bet, right? And so just be mindful of all those implications, and the way in which you conduct yourself, but also the way in which the science is conducted.
Absolutely. How do you like to stay healthy and active?
I exercise pretty regularly. I do get outside, and I ski, I play a lot of golf, hike, so spend a lot of time outdoors. I certainly pay attention to my diet, as it were. I'm not perfect by any means, but just try to do, I guess, the basics, right? Pay attention to your diet, exercise, stay active, both physically and mentally. I do try to meditate, but I would say I'm not very consistent at that. But I would say that when I do, I definitely feel better about myself and a little bit more centered. So
awesome. Those are great, activities for everyone to really kind of follow. So Chris, this has been a really great conversation. I want to ask you, is there anything else you want to share that maybe I didn't ask you about that might be helpful for our audience or community, and maybe for any drug hunters out there?
No, I guess I would just reiterate the point, right? That I think this really is a social imperative as we talk about rare diseases, and filling this void, this huge void, frankly, that 95% of rare diseases don't have an effective therapy, and rare diseases are not rare, right? And so I think if you're involved in drug discovery, taking the opportunity to participate in this and really important endeavor, I think is something that's very worthwhile. And so I'm really excited about the future of Rarebase, and what we're seeing thus far and where we intend to go. And again, just thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am going to ask one more question based on kind of this conversation, because I think that what we talked about, the first thing we talked about was teams and teamwork and how teams come together. And when you view like Rarebase in the biotech industry, and then you have the industry as the team, what position is Rarebase playing? And then you can choose the sport to compare it to, or to compare. Yeah.
I guess in a sense, we might be the point guard, right, on the basketball team, where we are early stage. As I said, we will uncover, I think, many, many opportunities for taking drug discovery hypotheses forward. We don't have the means to do all of those things now, And so we will very much be looking to partner with other biotech and pharma companies who have the means and the capabilities and the experience to carry these things forward. Likewise, working with investors, right, to keep the company funded and move really attractive ideas forward as quickly as we can, and working with patients. And so I would say we're a bit like the point guard, kind of bringing the ball down the court, and we will be passing it off likely many times. But we'll be hopefully calling some of the plays.
I love that. Chris Moxham, thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciate it. I hope the computer likes it as well. If you do have any questions or comments or concerns or ideas, let us know in the comments below. And we would love to learn more about what you're working on too. So thank you. Thanks again, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Ray. Have a good one.